This is part 2 of the lecture on using Google techniques and applying them in your own search strategies. We're going to cover using them in specifically searching in Google. We're going to take a look at Google Images, and we're going to touch on Google Scholar. To start things off, anytime I'm searching, I like to start with a few terms and then expand from there. So in this case, I'm going to search for emotional spending, but then I'm going to start expanding it once I see that I'm getting over 148 million results. So ways that I could start narrowing that in would be to add an ending for looking at just edu websites. So by clicking site : and then following that up with edu, I should be getting results that only have edu as their ending. That took out quite a few results for me, but I could start narrowing this more if I know that emotional spending is a phrase where those two terms come back together. If I've seen that there are some other ways of describing it, I could also add or stress spending. Maybe that's a term that I've seen connected with emotional spending. Now, once I've put those quotation marks around emotional spending, it's not going to look for synonyms anymore. So that's one reason I need to start adding additional terms here if I want to keep expanding on some things. That narrowed it down significantly when I added the quotation marks, even with this other or that's happening in here. I could also narrow this in by adding COVID or coronavirus to start going a little bit more specific. If I wanted to think about emotional spending in the context of coronavirus, that dropped out quite a few results from my search tools here, or what's available. If I wanted to expand this and we take the ending off, then we're going to jump all the way back up to 31,000. Something else that we talked about is adding in title. So if I wanted emotional spending to come back in the title, I could add in title with a colon and see where emotional spending is coming up. Because all of this is following in title, I'm seeing that there's some COVID showing up in the titles here as well, and stress spending. So it's including all of this as a possibility to include in the title. But it did reduce the results that I have. This example doesn't really require that I look at a specific date and time, but I could do that by going to Tools and then Anytime. Here's where I could start to look by a specific past hour or for a specific day. You could also do a custom range. This is especially helpful when I'm looking at news articles or something that's come up in the news recently and I want to look at that date. As an event occurs, if you think about the Evans Canyon fire from the summer of 2020, as that event unfolded, more and more information was published about that topic. So when you searched for Evans Canyon fire right at the beginning of the event occurring, you found maybe some limited information or few articles about it. But as time progressed, more and more was published and it became harder to sort through what is the most recent. Being able to limit to just a few past hours or the past 24 hours can be really helpful when you're dealing with that kind of an event. Okay, next up, let's talk about images and how we do a reverse search image in Google. Let's take a look at this article on the new stimulus bill makes illegal streaming a felony by TechCrunch. For this image listed here, if I want to reverse image search it, I can right click on it and take a look for the search Google for image. Now I'm using Chrome as a browser right now, and that's why it's giving me this option when I right click on the image, but you can reverse search from any other browser. You just have to go to Google Image and provide a link to where that image is located. But you can do this from any browser. So once I have reverse image searched this picture, I find out that it is connected to many other locations. So it does pull up the TechCrunch web page, but I can find the image and the details about the image and other locations where it's being posted. So it may be the case that this is used more widely and it's not necessarily something that TechCrunch created. Oftentimes you'll find that an image was from Wikimedia Commons or something where it is widely used or is licensed for wider use. This can be really helpful when you're trying to fact check something. And some techniques that fake news agencies or organizations or individuals will use is to find an emotionally grabbing picture and associate it with an emotionally grabbing title, even if those items are completely unconnected from each other. So when you reverse search an image, you can find out, was that picture actually connected to the article itself or just pulled randomly from the internet, which is something we want to avoid when we are being a savvy researcher. Let's take a look for the last part at Google Scholar. So, Google Scholar is somewhat like searching in OneSearch because it's primarily looking at articles and scholarly materials. The difference is Google Scholar is looking on the open web and is trying to find things that are available via the web because that's what it has access to, but not all of the things it's going to find are something you have immediate access to or can order through OneSearch. If you find stuff here and you want to get your hands on it, you can look for that in OneSearch as well. You're also going to want to connect your accounts. So if you go into your settings, that's where you can add Central Washington University Library, which means anytime an article shows up that we do have, you're going to get a link for it. So highly recommend using that right away. For this part, let's talk or let's do a research example where we're looking for the connection between COVID-19, vitamin D deficiency, and just seeing what articles are published about that topic. We've got 65,000 and it's highlighting places where those terms show up in the title. When I click on that link and go out to the location that it's hosted at, in this case, this is not the entire article, but a summary of the article. And I want to point something out about this article in particular, which is that it's part of a preprint server for the health sciences. Now, a preprint is different from a regular article. It has all the same indicators that you would look for in an article. A journal, you've got authors, you've got an official looking title, you've got an abstract. But it's a preprint, which means some of them may not have been peer-reviewed yet. It's before publication. And that's important, especially in health sciences, and should be regarded with some caution before accepting that information because it's not fully reviewed and it hasn't gone through the entire publication process that these things go through. So something that is not connected to Google Scholar but is worth mentioning is the Unpaywall app, which I've added over here. This little green thing that's popping up is useful for finding open access articles available on the open web. This is an add-on you can put into your browser and it will identify whether or not articles that you find on the open web do have an open access version. When I click on it, it's going to jump me out to, in this case, the article or the preprint article because this is in fact a preprint. Back over on my article here, actually we do want to have this one open because I do want to show you how to use the Google Scholar button in a moment. So here's an article and we're going to come back to that in just a moment. From the Google Scholar page, we just did a simple search. Here we put in our terms. If we want to use an advanced search, the good news is all the same stuff for using Google and those techniques applies. So I could make this search more complicated by applying all that same stuff. I could put in title, I could add or between these two terms in title. I could add quotation marks. And right now we're at 65,000 results, and when we did that, it lowered it down to 4,000. Kind of the fun thing about Google Scholar, though, is that if I do forget how to put these various elements in, when I pull up advanced search, I have the option, and it spells out exactly where to put in those phrases that I want it to be the exact phrase. So that's kind of a fun thing that's different about Google Scholar. All right, so the Google Scholar button is something else I would like to mention, and I've installed it up here. Same thing with the Open Unpaywall. It's an add-on, and so once you add it on, it will show up in your upper right-hand side. What this does is it allows you to look for other articles on the open web. So the example we're going to go for is we're just going to take a look and see if we can't find some references here. Okay, let's say I've read this article and I would like to learn more. So I'm headed to the references section and I see that they've got an article title, Evidence that vitamin D supplementation could reduce risk of influenza and COVID-19 infections and deaths. And I'm going to highlight that title, and I'm also going to highlight the journal that it's published in. Now I'm going to head over to this button up here and click on it. That searches the open web for locations where that article may be housed, and as you see, we've got a couple places showing up. I'm going to go ahead and click on that first one, and it's taking me out to the actual article. That was pretty easy because I did not even have to search that article. I literally just highlighted it and then searched for it in Google Scholar. With any of this searching, anytime you are getting stuck or feeling like you're not finding the resources that you need to, please come to the library or chat with us so we can help you find what you need.